listening. But the old adage, not to get all religious and philosophical on you, the idea of, God gave us 2 of these and 1 of these for a reason, doesn't mean we should do this half as much. It means we should do this double. But do we listen to what people are saying? Do we react to what people are saying? And in some cases, we're probably too quick to just jump on people, versus really listening, not just hearing, but listening to what they're saying. Absolutely, that's a great one. What's another one? Yes, sir.
Disrespectfulness.
Disrespectfulness.
Condescending. Off topic.
Fullness. I think I spelled that right, but if not. So, condescension is kind of interesting. And this also comes from when we're not listening. A good example, we're going to talk about in just a moment, is how we react to the speaker and not the message. That happens so often. For instance, let's say you don't like me. Every time I say something to you, we're like fire and ice, oil and water, we're friction. However, the one time I say something, I walk in, and little caveat, there is no emergency, because I know it's illegal to say what I'm about to say. The building's on fire. You go, that's Schoppman. Everything he says that comes out of his mouth, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. No, really, the building's on fire. Once again, he's reacting to the speaker, not to the message. Now, some of that is, we do this thing called filtering or encoding. But there's also just disrespect. And give me a good example, not with people's names, but, how... What's that? No names, but that's okay. Give me an example.
Yeah, I'd have to say Anthony Zito.
All right then. And once again, not specifically Anthony, but some people just have that. I call it the wet blanket approach. They're just negative. Actually, earlier this week I was in New Jersey, and there is a superintendent that works for this company that is just he's Debbie Downer. He's my mother-in-law. I can't explain it any better than that, but my mother-in-law is just, if you've ever seen that Saturday Night Live skit with Debbie Downer, where they go to Disney World, and she goes, 20 people a year die at Disney World from food poisoning. It's just like, are you kidding me? You managed to turn this completely around? Well, this superintendent was that guy. He would walk in, and you'll love this as estimators, no bid ever had enough money in it. Everything is setting us up to fail. This customer sucks. He just sucked the life right out of the room. And so communication, it makes it very difficult. It's kind of like what I said before. Some people are hard to love. But it also makes it very hard to communicate facts when you just do this thing called filtering. Whether it's filtering based on the receiver or filtering as the sender. In this case, that condescension. What's another one? Yes, ma'am, you had one.
It's similar to the disrespectfulness, but...
He copied her.
I figured as much. Condescension.
Disregarding how other people communicate, just saying, this is how I communicate, and it's the right way, and the way that you communicate, I don't understand it, and I am not going to attempt to try.
Stubborn.
Yeah, stubbornness.
Absolutely. Our open mind, or stubbornness and open-mindedness, the yin to the yang, in the sense that, we don't necessarily, think about how other people perceive things. When we do this a little bit later, a great example, there is what we call the D personality. And the phrase for that is, the reason it's called a D is because it's dominant. A lot of you in this room fit that bill. You are a high D personality. Why? Because that's why you are managers or supervisors, whatever. On the other hand, though, you are not incredibly emotional. So if someone comes in and says, and I've had this happen, by the way, oh man, sorry I'm late, boss. My wife left me last night. My dog died. I got a speeding ticket on the way here, my house burned down. You will look at it and go, okay, but you're 15 minutes late. What are we going to do about that? Completely missing the other part of this, which is, that person like has a lot going on right now. So the other part to it too is, if we talk about emotions, if we talk about those things, and you go, you're soft, you just don't understand. Come on, and you discount. No, you can't discount the way someone feels because that's the way they feel. And for me to judge that is inappropriate, just like they shouldn't do the same. But that happens a lot in today's business world. We disregard the other people. Now, we may not do it externally, because we're so customer-centric, but there also happens a phenomenon with a lot of my clients. They're very good with the external customers, i.e. Publix, the theater groups, the cities, the municipalities you work in. Sometimes it's the internal customers that we disregard. Oh, that's just Joe from accounting, or that's just the way they are, So sometimes our internal customer service and teamwork is lacking. And to me, everybody is a customer. And I define customer as anyone I have a transaction with. That doesn't have to mean necessarily making it rain. This just simply means we exchange something. You're giving me my cost report. I'm giving you this. Guess what? You're my customer. Do I treat you like that, or do I treat you like the redheaded stepchild? That's not what we want to do. What's another one?
Personalities.
Personalities, absolutely. Obviously, we're going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that in a little bit, so I'll kind of defer. What else inhibits great communication? Yes, ma'am.
Not having a good understanding of what the other's motivation is or what their viewpoint is. Probably more so motivation.
Yeah, there's a discussion that there's actually a technique that the Sandler Sales Institute, have you ever heard of Sandler? It's talking about kind of how to make good transactions with customers. They're actually kind of in the sales learning process. But one of the things that they talk about is, I can't necessarily get you to buy something until I have rapport with you. Well, I can't have rapport with you if I don't trust you. And they refer to it as what, it's kind of a neat model. They call it the Sandler submarine. Have any of you ever been on a submarine before? Yeah, it's submarines. One, I'm incredibly claustrophobic. It would just drive me crazy. But to go from the front of a submarine all the way to the back of the submarine, you have to go stage by stage. You can't, because you're underwater, you can't go and skip the middle of the submarine. What this model says is, and think about this in terms of your customer relations, how do we jump to that and go, here, just sign this change order? Whoa, 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 what do you mean this change order? I just need you to sign this paperwork. Unfortunately, your architect did a bad job. We have completely skipped over, I don't trust you necessarily. And I don't trust you because at this point, you've done nothing to develop that internal rapport. For me, I'm just a transaction. So when you think about your relationships with your customer on your teams, do you skip to it? Do you tend to think about the other parties? And is that inhibiting? Well, I just can't get anything accomplished. No one ever wants to do anything for me. Well, are you kind of hitting those right hot buttons, or are you skipping through the submarine? Well, you can't skip through the submarine because you're going to drown. You got to go cabin by cabin to develop that trust and rapport. What else? Let me give you one more thing that might inhibit great communication.
Distraction.
Or
Too many types of communication.
technology. Technology. Well, wait a second, Greg. I thought technology was supposed to improve our life. How is technology ruining or inhibiting great communication? How does that happen?
There's no eye contact.
No eye contact. Outstanding. Yeah, I sent a text message. We're going to talk about this in just a moment. But we are missing so much of the message. Oh, by the way, For all my young friends in the room right now, what is the predominant form of communication used today? Texting. Keep that in the back of your mind for just a moment, because we're going to touch on that. And I hopefully by the end of this one, you will say, oh my gosh, I'm only going to use texting to ask my spouse what we're having for dinner. I'm not going to use it for anything critical. It's a very sad story, but my brother sent a text message yesterday to my sisters and myself yesterday. My sister-in-law unfortunately has what's called Huntington's disease. If you know what that is, it's very similar to Parkinson's or Lou Gehrig's disease. My sister-in-law, unfortunately, they're having to call hospice in now, and it's not a great situation. But my brother, who is 65 years old, I might add, so for all those indictments we pick on millennials and say they love texting, my brother, and I can show you this on my phone right now, it is a text message this long telling us about how they've had to call in hospice, and how they're kind of going through the stages, and my brother-in-law, or my brother was just, kind of very emotional in his text. And he says, and by the way, I'm not really taking any phone calls today just because I'm not in a good mood right now, so have a great day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this was just a horrible example of a text message, because my wife, who's incredibly emotional, my sister is like hyper emotional, they were together. They called me up yesterday, both crying in the car, like, did you see Billy's I'm like, oh my gosh. My brother effectively dropped the hand grenade and kind of said, good luck with that. That's an example of bad text message etiquette. Now, I get it. I mean, it's maybe not even a good example for this discussion, but my point is, there are so many of those conversations we have in this world today that just unfortunately, let's send a text message to a customer. Hey, Mr. Publix, we're going to have to add about $100,000 to this project. Hope you have a great Friday. Good night. Is that a good example of great communication? No. But you know what it is? It's expedient. It's quick. I get to check the box and said, I communicated. Yesterday, I was with a peer group, actually here in Atlanta. It's a group of CEOs. And what was funny was the top complaint from these 5 CEOs from companies around the country was, you know what drives me crazy is when I ask a PM, a super, an estimator, did you call John Smith? Yeah, I texted him. That's not what I asked you. Did you call John Smith? I just told you, I texted him. And it is like this massive disconnect, how people are communicating. Now, I'll tell you this right away. What's funny is, there was a time, and actually I was thinking about it as these CEOs were saying it, there was a time when I remember my boss telling me, when I was at Arco, I would go to him and say, hey, did you call John Smith? And I'd say, yeah, I called him, I left him a message. And then he goes, why didn't you go over and drive to his office? So it kind of shows this evolution. Now we're defaulting to, yeah, I sent him a text message or I sent him an email. Sometimes the good old-fashioned eye contact, face-to-face, is something we have to do. Yes, does it take more time? Absolutely. But we need to figure out how to get back to that part of things. That's not me shunning technology or saying, oh, these young whippersnappers just love to use Instagram. No, that's just called communication 101 and what we have to do better. So, a couple things here. Communication, this is what I would call the definition for. When we look at this, it's the process of exchanging information. The listener, the sender, the medium, the vehicle we're using, the idea of a shared language or system, whatever that means. It's funny though, even if we're all speaking the same language, how many different interpretations can you possibly have? Then we have this neat thing that I've mentioned a few times called filtering. And this is probably one of the biggest impediments. Actually, 4 of the items up here all center around this thing called filtering or encoding. And we talk about it, these are the biases we have. These are just maybe the way you were brought up. You know, all of the things that make your personality your personality. You know, for instance, like I gave you the example before, if you don't like me, or if you, everything I say, you go, oh, Greg, it's just so annoying. But then I come to you with something factual, like the building's on fire. Do we have that natural inclination to go, Greg's just being an idiot again, look at him, just making emergencies, saying the building's on fire? That's an example of encoding. You see this today, and I'm not going to go down a political rabbit trail because that would be disastrous, but we see it today in just politics. People say something. Could be factual, could be not, but this concept of encoding or filtering happens all the time. For instance, you're architects or engineers. You may have a great relationship with your designer. You may have an awful relationship with the designer. But when they come to you that one time and say, hey, we need to have a meeting about life safety. Oh, you always want to have meetings. You know, meanwhile, it's just covering up for your crappy design. Well, once again, is that great communication, or are we discounting? That's probably even another word we can use, discounting. Give you an example here. We've got our messenger, what I mean versus what I understood. How many of you have ever said something, you go, I told them to do this. And then you ask that person, and they go, that's not what I heard. I'll give you a good example. Very recently, and actually these two people are not working for my organization anymore, had a senior guy and a young guy. Huge age disparity, and there was a lot of friction there. So I came to them and I said, I kind of asked them individually, because as the manager, it's part of my job at FMI. I said, what's going on? Why do you guys just not like each other? Well, he goes, well, Jim, unfortunately, told me, he gave me a deadline, and he says I didn't meet it, but I did meet it. I said, to me, that's fairly cut and dry, doesn't it? If I say I want something, and you don't hit that deadline, that's pretty black or white. Except this is how the conversation went. Jim, the senior guy, said to Steve, the younger guy, hey, can you turn around all those materials, the report that we're doing, turn it to me next week. Okay, sounds pretty cut and dry. Well, Steve said, yeah, I can do it next week, not a problem. Not a problem at all. Well, next week comes, i.e. Monday comes, and lo and behold, Jim says, did you turn, where's my report? Well, I'm not done yet. See, this is what I mean. You don't get your stuff done when I ask you to get it done. And meanwhile, Steve, what did Steve hear? What do you think Steve heard? Yeah, next week is 5 days. And I said this to Jim, I said, could you have been a little more concrete? Now, unfortunately, Jim is a very difficult personality, so his take was he should have known what I meant. How many of you have all said that? He should have known me. Yeah. Now, who's at fault here? Technically, both. Because the young guy should have said, let me ask you, I got a couple things going on next week. Going to be traveling, going to be going on vacation, going to be doing this. Do you mean Monday or do you mean Friday? Just like Jim could have said, instead of next week, can you have it by Monday? And we can talk that through. But folks, this type of mixed messaging happens all the time because of interpretation, assumption. We all know that famous phrase about assuming things. But here was two guys that are pretty smart, just like everyone in this room, that are speaking the same language, but everything is getting filtered. And when I asked Jim, you know what Jim, the senior guy, said? It's just these young guys, not having good work ethic. That's what Jim told me. He goes, see, they just don't want to work hard. That's what he did, and that's that encoding thing. Once again, what was factually right and what was factually wrong went out the window. Now, does this young guy have a bad work ethic? I can't tell you based on that interaction, but he was making generalizations about the millennials. He was making generalizations about this young person. This young guy was pretty smart and actually did have a good work ethic, but I can't make a judgment call based on that alone. So why do we communicate? Obviously to tell people information, to give people the details of our project, to persuade them, to sell. Sorry, I feel like to sell ideas, concepts. Consider, which would you like to do? Paint the walls blue or paint the walls purple? What does that come down to? Instruct, a little like we're doing here. And then lastly, hopefully, empowering. One of the questions I ask in all of my physicals, obviously I don't do just training, but the idea of doing these physicals and asking, do you feel empowered in your current role? And this is a rhetorical question for all of you. Do you feel empowered at Benning to make decisions? The next question that goes on top of that is, do you empower people yourself? Because it's one thing to go, yeah, no one ever lets me make any decisions. Everything goes through this bottleneck. The other hand, does everything have to go through you, or do we empower and delegate? And then you go, well, I got no one to delegate to. Okay, fair enough. I know some of us may not be in that position, but even if we did delegate, would we do it the right way? We'll talk a lot more about delegation the next time we're together. But this is the slide that I want you to remember, folks. To this young lady's point here, think about this the next time you text. So the idea, a message has these three components: the verbal, vocal, and visual. The verbal piece are the actual words themselves. It's the words on the slides. So I could have just sent you this slide deck and said, here's the training we're doing this Friday, good luck and figure it out. No vocal, no Gregg, no nothing, but just the slides. Well, the good news is you're getting 15% of the message, the words. The vocal component is the intonation of my voice. What do I emphasize? When my brother, usually, he's not a great texter, as I've already proven, but he always writes in capital letters. He does it because he's got fat fingers. It's a Schoppman trait. And he goes, I just write in capital letters because I don't have to use punctuation or anything. However, what do we often say with capital letters? Why are you screaming at me? Well, you can tell right now if I'm mad at you, if I'm happy with you, if I'm excited, just based on the intonation or the vocal component of my voice. And then lastly, you can tell I'm kind of an arm waver. I have a lot of body language. Some of the times we use this kind of body language, or we kind of come in and maybe embrace or engage with the speaker. Point is, that's the visual side. As she said, the eye contact. Am I even making eye contact? But look at this percentage, and I realize my percentages are cut off there for some reason. If I send a text message, how much of the message do you actually get? 15%. That's staggering, folks. That's staggering. Now the good news is if I pick up the phone and call, I'm getting 35% of the message. So obviously face-to-face is the best way. Now, I'm a realist too, folks. Your clients are all over the place. We can't go and have face-to-face conversations with every human being. That's why the telephone was invented in the first place. On the other hand, why do we choose to just do the text messages or emails? Some of that is because it's quick, it's easy. Those are probably the right reasons. The wrong reasons are, this is a sticky one. I don't want to have to see their face when I drop this hand grenade, and that change order. I had a client actually that racked up $2.5 million of unapproved change orders because their PMs were sending text messages to their clients. That's how they were handling change order management. Dear Mr. Customer, to add that thing, it will be $50,000. Have a great day. And then they went out and did the work. And when I asked them, I said, whoa, 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 stop the clock. How did we get here? You know, they go, well, I sent the change order in. I texted them. Well, we all know the challenging part of change orders is not the sending, it's the receiving part. And it's that awkward conversation we have to have. So the moment of reflection I want all of you to have is, how do you use technology? How do you communicate? Do you in fact use the right vehicle, the right tool to do said communication? How about this phrase here? By the way, I used to have one, and my friend back there would be so upset. I'm glad I changed it. I must have known you were coming. Because it actually used to say, I did not kick the dog. So I know, oh my gosh, yeah. However, this one up here is 6 words. 6 words. So let me ask you this. Pretty straightforward, I did not kick the ball. However, I'm going to read it a couple times. You tell me what you hear. I did not kick the ball. I did not kick the ball. I didn't kick the ball. What happened there? Same sentence, right?
Emphasis on different things.
Ah, the emphasis. However, to send that text message, you just interpreted how you wanted to interpret it. In this case, it could have not been me. I might not have kicked the ball. Maybe I punched the ball, or I tossed the ball. Or better yet, maybe it wasn't the ball. Maybe it was I kicked the wall. Or maybe I kicked the dog. Don't tell anybody. My point is, you know, there are 3 different interpretations. Maybe I even say, I didn't kick the ball. It was Sasser who kicked the ball. You know, someone else did it. My point is, this is 6 bloody words. 6. How many different interpretations can there be? There could be 6 different interpretations. So, now, when we talk about the types of communication, let's talk about what I want you to do at your table. Figure out all the different types of communication that you could possibly have. Obviously, we mentioned text. What I want you to talk about are the advantages and disadvantages. So kind of 3 different columns. What's the technique? And then what are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? Work at your table to list all those out, and we'll go from there.
You want to write it?